Hi there. Welcome to Small Business Coffee Break, the video series where we take a few minutes to work on your business, not just in it. Today we're talking with Jeffrey Daitz about who should be training your managers when it comes to employment practices. Jeffrey has over 20 years of experience in labor and employment litigation. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get into it. So we've talked about the handbook a little bit. We've talked about the importance of training, through the handbook. Now, when we're talking about training, who trains the trainer? So who's coming in and teaching the management exactly what the employee handbook, how to use it?
So if it's done the right way, it's not necessarily an HR component. HR helps. HR is certainly the vehicle. It's generally the lawyers. It's generally employment litigation lawyers who draft the policies. They draft the policies, they revise the policies, they make sure that they are EEO compliant, they make sure that they're carrying the language that needs to be there, again, also from the EPLI, from the insurance perspective. So it's the lawyers who are, let's just say, they're leading the coach. They make sure the policies are out there. Then what happens is they train the managers, including HR. So there's issues of whether HR could be a generalist, and defense counsel look at HR in different roles. Sometimes there are people that are dedicated to HR, and sometimes there are generalists. Some attorneys view generalists as HR that generally know a little bit about it. That's a different mechanism than what an actual HR generalist would consider themselves being. But you got to be very careful. Some people hold themselves out of having HR, but that is not an HR component. It's a payroll person, somebody that works in the payroll department who's handling an HR function. That person is going to have a more difficult time kind of rolling out and educating the mass, educating the rank and file. So best case scenario, you're talking about employment counsel implementing, revising, and putting your policies in place. From there, making sure that counsel comes in, provides the best workplace practice, which is what it's referred to, the best workplace practice training seminars for managers, including HR, and then those people from that point on should be able to be in a position to manage, educate, and train their employees.
Yeah, and within that, I mean, as I'm hearing you say that, so I don't know why it popped into my brain, but it's something I hear a lot about, and I'm guilty of not doing myself. Would the council you helping put the policies in place, can they also help with the auditing process to making sure that the policies are being enacted appropriately?
So it's a great question. It's kind of a funny question. Years ago, when I was talking to newer clients, new prospects, so to speak, I would ask them whether they've had an employment practice audit done by their counsel. And sometimes they would come back and say, let me find out. They would ask their counsel, and the counsel would come back and say, I can do it. Now I say, all right, now go back to that counsel and ask them, actually, what is an employment practice audit? And they come back to the client, and they say, well, what do you want it to be? Well, that's the problem. If the lawyer doesn't know what the employment practice audit is, you have the wrong lawyer. Okay, so the idea is the employment practice audit is a comprehensive review of everything. It is your applications, it is your counseling and discipline, it is your leave and accommodation request form, it is your performance evaluation. So just like rolling out a new handbook, having counsel come in there with the specialties so they can actually make sure the employment practice audit as well is consistent with the law, that's also going to help, again, towards the insurance aspect. Again, underwriters would love to see the fact that a company has invested a little bit of time and money into doing things the right way. Again, it improves morale, it improves everything. But from the insurance standpoint, from the underwriting standpoint, insurance carriers like the fact that companies are doing the right thing.
Well, because at the end, having those consistent practices, doing those things in itself shows something about the business, right? So it's not only that you're better trained, it's going through that process just illuminates certain parts of your business that were maybe a little bit too dark. And mistakes, that's where the mistakes end up happening.
And you think of it from our standpoint is when we first get let's just say a case assigned, or we get a client that comes in the door, and let's just say they're sued for any form of employment litigation issues, race, religion, national origin, sexual preference, disability, it runs the gamut. We come in there, we take a look at the handbook, we take a look at their policies, we take a look at all of these things. We took a look at the training, if employees, managers were ever trained. Our frontline defense rests in how good your policies and your education are to your employees. If you don't have that, we're already behind the 8 ball. We're already in a more defensive position here because we're dealing with, if the policies and the training haven't been done, odds are lack of documentation is the next thing we're going to have a problem with. So if there is no handbook, problem. If there is a handbook but it's outdated, another problem. If there's a handbook not prepared by an employment lawyer, but more a generalist that doesn't cover what should be, yet another problem. So if there's an internal workplace investigation that takes place, odds are the investigation process would be tainted as well, because there'll be lack of documentation because they weren't trained effectively on how to do it the right way.
If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Jeffrey, I put his contact information in the description below. If you have any questions you'd like me to ask Jeffrey or any other professional in their field, my information is also in the description. See you next week for another cup of coffee and more questions answered.